Good morning and welcome to the MinStack February 2026 webinar. My name is Sonia Tostison. I'm on the Educations and Forums Committee with the Minnesota State Tree Board, also known as MinStack, the Minnesota Shade Tree Advisory Committee. We have a number of folks here that are on that committee, and we're happy to put on this double presentation for you today in February. First up, we'll have Madisson Masucci from the DNR give an UCF Urban and Community Forestry update. And then we'll have that followed by a brief time for questions. And then we'll switch over to Mark Kruse, also from the DNR, on some maple syrup tapping, and then have questions after that one. So please feel free to put your questions in the chat. I believe that should be up and running. We'll also be putting Shane here to the test and putting links in the chat as well to our MinStack newsletter, our forums page. Just a note that we won't have a forum in March because it's the Shade Tree Short Course, which is the 2-day Festival Bonanza Conference that we host in partnership with the University of Minnesota and several other organizations, Minnesota Landscape Association. And so that's coming up mid-March, and I believe all the pre-spots have been filled, so that's really exciting. And then this is also being recorded, so you can view it later or share it. It'll be up on our website, on our YouTube playlist that's hosted through the University of Minnesota within the next couple of business days. So, and today as advertised, we don't have any ISA CEUs. They didn't apply for today's presentations, but we hope you sit back and enjoy them all the while anyway. First up, we have Madisson Masucci, who will be giving a DNR update. Welcome, Maddie. Take it away.
Thank you, Sonia. I'm going to get my screen shared here. It is lovely to be chatting with everyone this morning. Can you see my screen now? Perfect.
Yep.
Okay, so today I am just going to give a brief overview of the Minnesota Urban and Community Forestry Program at the DNR. My name is Maddie Masucci, and I am the Urban and Community Coordinator. We're going to go through a little bit of context about what our program is and what we've been up to and where we hope to go in the future here. So for starters, the Urban and Community Forestry Program, as I'm going to refer to it throughout this presentation, is a program that's dedicated to growing and maintaining urban trees, forests, and green spaces. All trees planted in cities, suburbs, and rural towns in the state are urban and community forestry resources. And a community, regardless of its size or location within the state, has access to support from the DNR to help manage their urban and community forestry resources, including those street trees, park trees, community forest spaces, and residential trees. So as a program, our jurisdiction is all non-state lands where trees would impact people and infrastructure. So what that means is that's the niche in which we try to help fill those technical resources and support systems. We work with residents, nurseries, counties, municipalities, community groups, arborists, tree care, industry workers, and nonprofits to provide tree management guidance and resources. Trying to advance my slide. Apologies. Looks like it's not moving. I'm so sorry. I'm going to stop sharing for just 1 second. See if I can get this to cooperate. Okay. Thank you for your patience. Hopefully I fix the problem. All right. So as we all know, perfect, trees provide a ton of benefits to humans, including reducing heat-related stress, cleaning the air, lowering our electric bills, and so many other great tangible benefits. Through supporting the management of trees in urban and community forestry spaces, we can help ensure that all Minnesotans are getting access to these benefits. As human beings, we've been planting trees alongside the areas we live in order to take advantage of those benefits for a very long time. And here in the United States, colonization and the creation of permanent European settlements across the US really set the scene for what we consider urban and community forestry today. Unfortunately, a lot of those early planning and planting efforts were done without acknowledging potential insect and disease issues, which has set the stage for a couple issues throughout our tree canopy history here. But the one I want to bring up is Dutch elm disease, as its nationwide impact with ravaging our urban trees led to extremely high losses across the country, but especially in Minnesota as well. And following this devastation of our urban canopies, the urban and community forestry field realized we needed to shift towards more comprehensive planning and management strategies for greater diversity of our canopies. So, amidst all of this devastation, Tree City USA was launched by the Arbor Day Foundation in 1976. And that is the first ever time we had a national set of standards for urban forestry. Followed closely behind that was the Cooperative Forestry Assistance Act of 1978, which created an urban forestry program within the USDA Forest Service. And then the Farm Bill of 1990, shortly, a little decade later, created the Urban and Community Forestry Program as it stands today. So I'm telling you all this. Man, I am really struggling with my slides.
Hey, Maddie, if you just click on the screen, it's probably that Zoom is in the foreground. So if you just click on the screen and then try advancing.
Okay. Did that work for you guys? Perfect. Thanks, Ryan. Okay. So the reason I'm telling you all of this backstory is because our program is a partnership with the United States Forest Service, as well as University of Minnesota and MNSTAC. And there's a lot of great people at the table doing a lot of great work across the state. And I want to just highlight the relationship that exists between all of us, because I'm going to build upon that as we move into later slides in my presentation. So with the creation of the Urban and Community Forestry Program within the United States Forest Service, they created a set of standards that every state has to meet in order to receive federal funding. One of those standards is requiring an Urban and Community Forestry Coordinator and a volunteer coordinator. So I am the Urban and Community Forestry Coordinator, and the lovely Sonia Tostison is our Volunteer Partnerships Coordinator over at the University of Minnesota. And we work in partnership with the University of Minnesota and the U.S. Forest Service through this funding to be able to provide that technical support and outreach to communities across the state through both of our positions and programming that we're doing. Another one of our standards we have to meet for the Forest Service core programming is to have a tree advisory board. Our tree advisory board is the Minnesota Shade Tree Advisory Committee, or MNSTAC, which you likely know about because you're here at a MNSTAC forum today. And then the final component that the U.S. Forest Service requires us to have is a current state forest action plan. And those are updated every 10 years. So our last one was created in 2020, and we will be updating it again in 2030. So what is the program striving to do with all of this, all these things that I'm talking about? Our goal is to increase environmental services by creating and maintaining healthy urban and community forests. So all of the work I'm going to dive into today is really centered around this core goal. And we have quite a few people who are making that happen. So on the DNR side of things, we have Valerie McClanahan, who's the CFM Assistant Supervisor, myself, Molly Cod. Oh, is there an issue, Sonia? Or... Okay.
I'm working on it. The chat's still
Perfect. Okay. Molly Cotting is our Community Environmental Justice Coordinator. And then we have 3 Community Forest Project Specialists, Rachel Maurice, Mark Kruse, who you're going to hear from after me today, and then Rachel Dvorak. And then additionally, we have 22 cooperative forest management foresters around the entire state spread out that have between 10 and 30% of their time allocated to urban and community forestry work. And then as part of that pass-through partnership and work that we do with the University of Minnesota, we have Brian Murphy, the U4 lab supervisor, Sonia Tostison, Dan Geertsen, the arboriculture program coordinator and educator, Marissa Enders, and a variety of undergrad students, all working to support these goals. So moving on. I wanted to give some highlights because I think I'm going to get a little, probably some negative things and some of our funding topics that are coming up in the presentation. So I wanted to give you guys some fun things to focus on first. So these are just a couple quick highlights from the last year-ish of our work. In 2025, our team partnered with 8 different organizations to participate in 9 community-led events across the state. We have also been working with 148 different organizations to manage 201 different contracts over the past year. And since July 1st, 2025, we've reimbursed $2.35 million in grant funds to communities, nonprofits, schools, and other organizations across the state. So a lot of really great work getting done by not only us, but our partners too. And we're so grateful to get to do all of this work. So hopping over into our so this is all of the funding we currently have. Just as a note, roughly half of this total amount on the screen has already been spent, but it's part of the full packages we're managing. So just to give you a sense of scale and where things are at, you'll note that there's a variety of different packages and expiration dates listed in here. So focusing in on the federal funding, we have about just shy of $9.6 million across 9 federal awards, including core funding, as well as some competitive grant programs. And those expiration dates range from 2026 to 2030. And then our state funding, we have about $31.4 million, and that spans 4 grant programs, including the Relief 2024 and 2026 grants, community tree planting grants, shade tree bonding, and LCCMR. And just to note that 3 of those packages, Relief, Community Tree Planting, and Bonding, will expire in June of 2027, and our current LCCMR expires in June of 2026. So looking ahead into fiscal year 27, we wanted to give you kind of a look into where we're going to be. So federal funding is uncertain at best. We should be able to access the annual core amounts, which is set to be around $290,000. It hasn't been finalized at this point. Urban and community forestry at the federal level was allocated $37 million in the Interior Minibus bill for 2026 back in January. There hasn't been any additional detail in the appropriation process of finalizing what's going out to the states. So we can anticipate it'll be around that base amount of $290,000 though. Over the last few years, we've received more funding than this base amount, And we've typically had access to competitive funds as well at the federal level. So typically our federal program funds annually over the last 5 years have been averaged out to $869,000, excluding our Inflation Reduction Act award. So with the loss of competitive funds at the federal level and a reduction in the amount of core that we can anticipate, we're going to lose an average annual funding amount around $580,000 on the federal side. On the state side, we've been so lucky to receive large appropriations from shade tree bonding grants, relief, and community tree planting grants over the last 3 years. Since 2023, we've been allocated $29.5 million through these programs to help communities manage their urban canopies. Looking forward into 2027, we no longer have these large one-time appropriations and are dropping back down to the annual appropriation amount for relief of $400,000. So this is a substantial drop in anticipated funding, going from an average of approximately $9.8 million in state grant funds over the last 3 years to only $400,000. In total, we're anticipating roughly a $10 million reduction in funding between both state and federal funds on an annual basis. So, like I mentioned, I was going to get into some negative things, but I do have a positive thing with the fiscal year 27 funding outlook. We have a new LCCMR appropriation that starts July 1st, 2026. And we'll be working hard to hit the ground running with that funding. We'll be supporting a few partnerships, developing a new web tool, and having a new round of community forest grants available through this funding. So moving into a little more detail on the funding side of things, I wanted to take a moment to just highlight the differences between what we've historically been able to support through different funding sources, as I know it's probably not common knowledge where our federal funding versus state funding goes to within the program. So our federal funding supports a variety of things, including our University of Minnesota U4 programming that includes the Shade Tree Short Course, Tree Care Advocates programs, MNDNR forums, and youth arboriculture engagement programs, as well as the tree inspector education components. It also supports sub-award programs, including centering communities in canopy solutions, growing tomorrow's tree care professionals, tribal community forestry, our suffer grant programs, and other small EAB-related grant programs and wood utilization programs. It also supports both state and University of Minnesota employee salary. On the state side, we primarily are able to fund sub-award grant programs like I've highlighted previously with those relief, shade tree bonding, community tree planting grants out to communities and nonprofits, and then support our state employee salary. So with everything that we're doing between both us and our partners, we're required to report our accomplishments annually to the U.S. Forest Service. And the number of folks we have meeting different criteria and being assisted by us informs the amount of federal funding we have access to. So we want to ensure all of our data is as accurate as possible. And just to give you a look at kind of a look back between 2020 and 2025, I have a comparison here. In order for a community to be considered managing, they must have all of the following things. So that top line where it says communities managing programs, they need to have a management plan, staff dedicated to tree work, a tree ordinance, and a tree advisory board or committee. The next line down is communities developing programs. and they're considered developing if they have 1 to 3 of those 4 listed items. You'll note our numbers for managing communities have gone down from 2020 to 2025, and developing numbers went up approximately the same amount. This is largely due to tightening our definitions of what meets the required metrics and going through our old data to kick out anything that we couldn't verify as accurate anymore. You'll note, though, that our number of folks living in a community who has received assistance has gone up, and our number of communities receiving financial assistance has risen drastically as well. So what constitutes as assistance? I just wanted to give a quick highlight, and this is just a snapshot of a lot of the things we're doing. It may not encompass every single thing that we've got going on, but we provide technical support to communities, including best management practices, city ordinance development, species recommendations, and planting and management plans. We do education and outreach through tabling at events, tree plantings, school events and career talks, and professional education events and workshops. And then the U of M programming supports the tree inspector education, tree stewards, and tree care advisors. So not a comprehensive list, but just to give you a good look at all of the types of ways with which we're interacting with communities. And then these next couple slides are going to kind of show you where our expenditures have been broken out into a couple different buckets. So in fiscal year 2025, the bulk of our expenses are still state-funded expenditures, about 66% being out-of-state funds. And the chart on the right shows what funding source within the state those came from. So about 60% from the general fund, 20% from bonding, and 20% from LCCMR. Pulling out the federal expenditures, we have a little bit different picture. We have quite a bit of our core packages that all have smaller amounts, ranging from 1% to 33%. The bulk of our funding has been from the Inflation Reduction Act Expanding Access Grant. So a lot of our expenditures are coming out of that right now. And then where are we spending that funding? This is just a breakdown of expenditure by type. So you'll see the pass-through to the University of Minnesota is about 30% of that total expenditures that we've had. About 25% has been to community grants. And then 42% has been to nonprofit grants. And then very small percentages have gone to MNDNR / Minnesota Society of Arboriculture, travel and supplies, and federal indirect costs. Looking at our expenditures by fiscal year, you'll see our state-funded expenditures have risen drastically over the last handful of years. And our federal fund expenditures have really jumped just in the last year due to that IRA funding. We have quite a bit of expenditures we anticipate in 26, and then after a lot of our grants expire in that June 30th of 2026, we anticipate seeing this go down. So looking at where is all that funding going, I wanted to highlight our past and current grantees. So from 2020 till now, this is a map of all of the grantees that have like a physical location and the types of work that the types of funding that they've been allocated. So there's different icons for state grantees, federal grantees, and then broken down further with federal IRA grantees and federal BIL grantees. So you can see we have grantees all across the state throughout different types of funding sources as well. And we have a lot of great work being done, and that's already been done by some of these closed programs as well. So shifting gears just a little bit, I wanted to highlight the ways in which we interact with MNSTAC and the ways in which we're hoping to engage with MNSTAC as we continue to do some of the strategic planning and working throughout this year. So with MNSTAC, our organization provides meeting support through staffing for taking those meeting minute notes, snacks, and providing a meeting space. We also provide financial support for travel to in-person meetings for the board. And then additionally, we provide that pass-through funding to the University of Minnesota to manage the monthly education forums like we're in today, as well as the weekly newsletter and website. And additionally, we provide monthly agency updates to the MNSTAC board. And then the ways in which we are hoping for MNSTAC to engage with us and how they have in the past as well is we want MNSTAC to engage around the Minnesota Forest Action Plan. When we do those 10-year updates, it's really great to get the community feedback on what our priorities need to be going into planning sessions, getting input on our core narrative and what we want to focus some of those federal core dollars on. Additionally, providing community feedback on urban and community forestry needs from across the state, and interacting with communities to ensure that we get adequate representation from all of the stakeholders here. And then additionally, we ask MNSTAC folks to participate in grant review as they are able to as well. So with all this, we're continuing our efforts to meet the governor's initiative of 30% canopy cover by 2030 and 40% canopy cover by 2050. Based on our 2020 data, we were at 28% canopy cover. Our goal will be to continue to assess and refine data to ensure we're on track for meeting this initiative. With some of our upcoming LCCMR funding that I mentioned, we'll be creating an analysis of plantable spaces within communities and creating an interactive layer within our rapid assessment community tree report map that allows users to see where their plantable spaces are and what size tree would be suited to that space. We will continue to pursue funding to help communities maintain and expand their canopies, as well as providing technical support and expanding resources to meet the needs of communities statewide. A brief highlight here of 2 new web tools we'll have available to the public in the next month are our Rapid Assessment Community Tree Report Map, which was highlighted during the December forum, so I won't dwell on that. And then additionally, we'll have a community program status webpage. So just a quick peek at the Rapid Assessment Community Tree Reports. We're really excited. We're going to be doing a series of outreach events over the next month and a half, so that folks can get in person or join us virtually to learn how to use the tool. So stay tuned for more information on that. We'll plan to advertise it through the MNSTAC weekly newsletter, so can look for more details there. And then our community program status webpage tool. This should be live in the next 2 weeks. This is designed so that folks can go and check out what data we have on your communities. And there will be an opportunity on the webpage to submit additional data if we don't have the most up-to-date metrics for your community. So you'll be able to check on those 4 components that make a managing community and determine whether your community is currently listed as managing or developing. And then we also hope that this will be a good opportunity for folks to take a peek at what other municipalities or communities around them are doing and be able to make connection points to develop program needs with communities that are similar in size and location and have similar issues that they might be facing. So, additionally, looking forward, we're going to have a new round of Protect Community Forest funding open for communities later this year. We also are working on developing urban wood utilization resources and education opportunities. We're working on creating a storm readiness and response toolkit as well. And we're working through creating tree board resources and technical assistance to help developing tree boards. So I know I threw a lot at you, but I really appreciate your time and energy throughout this presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions that you guys might have.
Well, we've got one question from the chat, Maddie. It asks to clarify, are community grants municipal grants?
So community, it primarily is municipal. There may also be, there are also tribal governments and potentially like SWCD or other types of local units of government would fall under that umbrella of community grants.
Thank you. And unless there's any other latecomers, oh, here we go. A follow-up. Do municipalities rely on direct federal funding for forestry and natural resources? If so, those funds will be reduced as well.
So historically, no. The avenues for funding into communities have gone through that pass-through phase. There are exceptions to that, such as the Inflation Reduction Act, where there are direct awardees to municipalities through that funding. So there are impacts to municipalities overall, though.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Maddie. Mark, if you want to start sharing your screen, we can get going. Our second presenter today is Mark Kruse, also from the Department of Natural Resources, and he will be presenting on the DNR's, or on maple tapping for today's presentation.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Again, my name's Mark Kruse. I'm a project specialist with the Urban and Community Forestry team at the DNR. And yeah, like Sonia said, today I'm going to talk a bit about maple syrup, maple tapping, and kind of some of the process and behind this awesome activity as we're coming out of this cold winter, as we're starting to think more about spring and temperatures warming up. This is a great activity to do to get outside. And yeah, so we're just going to kind of go through that process a little bit, some of the science behind it, and also the different opportunities that come about. I think as far as community engagement, yeah, it's a great opportunity to get people involved and part of an urban forest. So we're going to talk a bit about that today. I'm going to start with a little passage from a children's book that I really like. It's called Sugar on Snow by Nancy Dingman Watson. I think this passage just kind of sums up this feeling the first time you tap a tree in kind of that late winter. The story is about these three kids who go out and tap these trees and just they go into great detail. It's actually all very accurate and very good, but they just go through the process of tapping maple trees and collecting the sap and boiling and making the syrup. It's great. But yeah, so it reads: Peter took the brace and bit and made a hole in the first bare tree. Snowy chips and silver slivers sifted over his muddy boots. Peter tapped a spout into the hole. Then he stood back to watch. A bright, shiny drop of sap rolled out and landed on Katie's tongue. Yum, lish, said Kate. Hammy hung a bucket under the spout. Katie put it on the lid, and the sap began to drip, drop, bang, bang, bang in the bucket. Sugaring had begun. And it's the handful of years I've been able to tap. That is one of the most memorable moments, and I think this is a great way to put it into words. And I really love it. So my time maple tapping, again, I'm a hobbyist at this. I've not done it professionally or for any kind of economic benefit for myself or anything. This has just been a fun thing that my family and I have gotten into over the last handful of years. The first time we tapped must have been in 2018. At the time we were living in La Crosse, Wisconsin. The picture in the center is my wife and our newborn son, Oliver. We put three taps into a silver maple in our yard. I think we maybe had about 20 gallons of sap, maybe a gallon of syrup. No, probably half gallon of syrup. And just, we had a lot of fun doing it. And we reached out to different, like our personal community members, family and friends to get them involved. We had opportunities to reach out to some of our neighbors and community in La Crosse who was interested in helping us and joining us in tapping trees, and we had a lot of fun. Since then, we were able to tap trees, maple trees out at my parents' property in central Wisconsin. They had 10 acres around Ontario, Wisconsin. We were able to tap trees out there for a year. And then as we've gone through this process, our equipment has changed and our locations have changed. All the way up to on the right side, the right picture is a reverse osmosis filtration system. So you get this when a retired fish and wildlife biologist, and then also my father, who's a retiree, get together and have a lot of time and excitement about maple tapping, and they create this awesome filtration machine. Don't think that that is necessary. Of course, this is an optional piece of equipment. It works great. It's a lot of fun if you're able to add it to your tapping maple syrup, but it's not needed by any means. So yeah. Throughout my time tapping maple trees, again, we've got a good understanding of this process. We've really been able to refine some things. We've learned from mistakes. We've now know what we would like to do and what we would avoid doing. And so I'll do my best to kind of share some of that with you today. So first, we'll talk a bit about the biology of tree sap, what's happening inside these trees. So in late summer and fall, trees start to store excess starches throughout their vascular cells. These cells are called rays, and they're found in the xylem. In plant biology, we learned that the phloem tissue usually transports the sugars within the tree, and the xylem then transports water and dissolved minerals that come from the tree's roots and the leaves. However, as this tree goes into its dormancy, in this fall and winter, those sugars are then more so stored and concentrated in that xylem cells. So a little bit of a difference as we go, a different use of those vascular cells as we go into this dormancy phase of a tree's life. So then in late winter and in early spring, when temperatures start to reach 40 degrees Fahrenheit, as we're getting out of that freezing temperatures, enzymes change the stored starches, change them into sugars, primarily sucrose, and then those sugars combine and mix with the tree's sap. Then the tree, this process as required as part of this tree's life cycle or annual cycle, because then those sugars are used by the tree to come out of its dormancy, to put on its first new growths, to kind of kickstart it out of its dormancy into the growth that needs to continue going through photosynthesis and creating its own energy as it grows through the growing season. And so when this sap, how that storage of sugars translates into sap flow is that the sap begins to flow through a maple tree when those daytime temperatures are reaching around that 40 degrees Fahrenheit or more. And then the nighttime temperatures are then dipping back down below freezing. So when there's this fluctuation in that nighttime and daytime temperatures, that's on either side of like a freezing temperature. So then when that temperature is high, the liquid, the sap within that tree, the molecules, I guess they start to expand and create this positive pressure that occurs within the vascular tissues of a dormant tree. And then when those temperatures then drop back down in the evenings, there's this negative pressure that occurs. So when these temperatures are consistently cold or consistently warm, or when when the trees come out of dormancy and buds break, that pressure change doesn't happen. That kind of fluctuation doesn't happen. So this pressure is changing within the trees throughout these days with these pressure difference, or sorry, with these temperature differences. And so when there's a break in that vascular tissue, that pot, instead of that the sap staying within that tree, that positive pressure then is pushing the sap out of the tree. And that's how we're collecting, that's where we're getting sap from these maple trees for this process. Um, yeah. And so why not take advantage of a good thing? Let's collect this sweet syrup, collect this sweet sap, make a fantastic syrup. It's a great opportunity. So we'll talk about kind of that process. Um, First off, you want to pick the right trees. Primarily, well, yes, you can tap other genus of trees, black walnut, birch. I have never done either of those. I've only done maple, primarily just what's been available to me. It would be interesting to try birch and black walnut. But for this talk in particular, we'll talk about just tapping maple trees. So in this fall, spring, summer, winter, depending on how good your tree ID is, go into the trees that you have access to and mark them, make a map, make note of what maple trees are available to you and what you would like to tap. So the species of trees that you're looking for are going to be, of course, sugar, black, silver, red maples, as well as box elder, which is in the maple family or in the maple genus and has a sugar content. And then Norway maples, I think recreationally, I have tapped Norway maple trees and they've done fine. I haven't been able to tell a very big difference between that and syrup that you get. Sommelier of fine maple syrups might be able to tell the difference, but I cannot. So again, there's a lot of opportunity to be able to collect sap from a lot of different maple trees, and so one thing to keep in mind is the primary difference between like sugar and black maples and then silver, red box elder, and Norway maples is going to be that sugar content in the sap. Sugar and black maples have a higher content of sugar. So then when you boil down that sap to turn it into a syrup, your ratio of the amount of sap you need to get a certain amount of syrup is lower. So you need about 40 gallons of sap boiled down would result in about a gallon of syrup. For some of the other maple species, silver and red, box elder in Norway, that sugar content in that sap isn't quite as high. So you're more into that 60-ish, 60 to 80, kind of depending, gallons of sap would then render down into or boil down into 1 gallon of syrup. So this picking the appropriate trees is very important. And this is the first step, absolutely. I'd say a good idea is to ensure you're just picking healthy trees. If your tree has had stress throughout the year or has signs of decay, hasn't been its strongest, I think it'd be best just to leave that tree be. Make sure the trees you're collecting sap from are strong, healthy trees. Tapping is wound. You are creating a wound on the bark. So we don't want to add any more stress to the tree that's already struggling. So pick a healthy tree with a full crown, no decay, and something that can take this little bit of damage and be able to heal and recover from it quickly. So that first part, you picked your trees, you've been excited and waiting all winter long. You're getting into this late winter, early spring, and it's time to start thinking about that sap collection. You'll start seeing stuff out now. I've seen a handful of folks who are starting to tap trees already. We'll talk a little bit about that later on, but now's this time to start having all this equipment and supplies that you would need to be collecting that sap. So the first thing you're going to need is taps. Basically, any small tube that can take any sap that's going to come out of the tree and move it away from the tree trunk so it can drip into a bucket is all you're going to need. A common one is going to be a spile. These are plastic or metal taps. On the top right corner picture is a real traditional kind of cast aluminum spile. They have plastic tubes work really well. Like if you have small pieces of pipe. A friend of mine used to tap trees. He would have just kind of junk Bic pens. You would take the caps, the tops and the bottoms off of those, drill a hole and tap those into a tree, and they work fine. I think the DNR and a couple of state parks has done it with the bottom two pictures are just wood dowels that had some extra dowels around the shop. You're able to cut them into maybe little 3 inch, 3.5 inch long pieces and drill a hole through them, and that's going to be able to do exactly what you need. It's just a way to get that sap to guide it away from the trunk a little bit so it can drip into the bucket you're using. So there's a lot of different opportunities for those taps. The next bits and pieces you're going to need are drill and the correct size drill bits, whether this is an electric hand drill or a manual brace and bit. Make sure that the bit size you have is going to be the appropriate size to fit the taps that you're using. You'll need a hammer to be able to gently tap those the taps into a tree, buckets to be able to, or bags to be able to collect that sap as it's falling out of your spile or your tap as it's coming out of the tree. Possibly tubing if you're looking to add maybe more tubing lines to kind of collect sap from multiple trees to a single bucket or container. All that is kind of optional. And then also a storage tank, a cool place to be able to keep the sap as you collect it until you're ready to get into that boiling process to boil it down into syrup. But the bare bones minimum, you need taps and you need buckets and a way to get that tap in with the drill bits that's all at the very least is what you'll need to be able to tap a tree. So when the conditions are right, when it's time, like ours, we're in these correct temperatures now, go ahead and tap away. So you start by drilling a hole in your maple tree. Again, you need a bit that is going to be the correct size to the tap that you're using. If you're using a spile, traditionally, there's like a larger and smaller size spiles. Those are going to be like a 7/16 inch bit or a 5/16 inch bit. Those are kind of across the board the most common ones. If you're making something your own, if you do a dowel or something, you might need to change that a bit. Drill your hole about 3 feet off the ground. This isn't that important as far as specifically 3 feet. Really, this hole can be drilled at whatever's a comfortable height for you to be able to be doing work at this. If you're on a downhill slope, you might have a higher hole. If you're uphill, it might be lower down on the tree trunk. Basically, whatever height's most comfortable, consistent, but it's suggested 3 feet. But again, that can vary. The hole should be about 2 to 2.5 inches deep, getting past the phloem into that xylem, where that's most of that sap, that pressure is happening, or most of that sap is being pushed. And then also you want it to be sloping down slightly. And this bottom picture has that bit going in at just a slight angle. Big reason for that is just to ensure as that pressure in the tree builds up and sap starts to flow out of your taps, it's running down and nothing is going to be kind of stuck inside the spile or tipping back into the tree as you get it back into those freezing temperatures at night. If that moisture or water is still in the hole that you drilled and it freezes, it could create it will expand and possibly crack the bark or crack the tree trunk. It might very slightly, but can create more damage. And so you want there to be nice unrestricted flow out of the tap. So a slight sloping downward angle is good. If you can have the taps on the south side of a tree, that's a great opportunity. That's going to be that's that warmer side because this process is so temperature dependent. If you can have your tap on a warmer side of the tree, you're going to get a little bit more of that positive pressure happening and more flow from your trees. And then space your taps out evenly around larger trees. There's going to be some opportunities you'll be able to tap have more than one tap in a tree. So make sure that those taps are like evenly spread out, and be sure to stay about 6 inches away from any wounded wood or old taps, just to make sure that you're into this real healthy live wood where you're going to be able to collect most sap from. Okay, so now we can look at the as I mentioned before, you can sometimes be able to put more than one tap in per tree. Anything under 10 inches, I would avoid tapping that tree. It's maybe not quite mature enough. Um, I think really make sure that that tree is going to be a little bit more mature, more established. Anything between that 10 to 14 inch diameter tree could take one tap. 15 to 19-inch diameter tree could take two taps. 20 to 24-inch diameter tree could take three, and then 25-inch and up, you could possibly get about four taps in. I wouldn't suggest you go beyond four if you're working on really, really large, maybe sugar or silver maples. Um, you might be able to squeeze the fifth in, but I think four is enough to ensure that you're not doing any damage. You're still be able to collect a lot of sap from a tree, and I think that's a pretty good a good number to stick with. So throughout the year, throughout your tapping season, on average, you can expect 8 to 10 runs of sap during that season. Right, so that's 8 to 10 really strong, consistent days when the temperature is below freezing and above freezing, and you're going to get an excessive or a lot of sap flowing out of that tree. Um, and then to kind of calculate how much you might be getting, um, a general rule of thumb is you'd get about a gallon of sap per tap per run. So if, okay, in the year we have 10 runs, I got to do this the math in my head and make sure I get this right. If you do 10 runs and you have maybe three taps out, and you get 1 gallon, 30 gallons? Is that right? 300 maybe. I should have written that down. This is just a metric to follow to make sure that you can I'm nervous. I can't figure that one out at the top of my head. Just a metric to be able to get a sense of how much you might be collecting, and then you can know that will help determine what you would need for storage, how much bottles you might need to be able to hold your syrup in when you're done. It's just a metric you can kind of go off of as you plan for the rest of this process. Can't believe I couldn't figure that math out. I'm not even going to keep trying. Storing sap. Okay, so that's the best idea is to process sap as soon as you can. You'll get the highest quality syrup if you can go straight from a tree after a day collecting into an evaporator and boil that. That's a really good process. That's not always obtainable. It's not always easy to do. We all have a lot of other stuff going in our lives, so sometimes the processing part has to be more on our schedule. So if you're gonna go ahead that way, make sure you can store sap. Make sure it's in a really nice, cool, dark space. You best to keep it below 40 degrees Fahrenheit and ensure that it's out of the sun. This box on the right side is I think this is from a state park. I can't remember exactly which one, but it's just this insulated wood frame box that they created. They put the garbage cans inside, filled it with snow, and then have been able to close that. And that's a fantastic way to keep your sap nice and cool. That's going to stay real consistent, and we'll be able to store and keep for a week or so until you're able to boil it off. So something like that, whatever you can do. If you have a old basement, maybe put it down there or in a garage. Out of the sun's a big deal. Just know that sap can spoil. It does, and it can spoil quite fast. If you look into if you have some sap that you've stored for some time, and when you come back to it, if it's kind of yellow or cloudy or stringy, it's spoiled. There's some kind of fermentation process and that has happened in there, and it's worth discarding. You wouldn't be able to get any kind of quality syrup out of that. And I would really stress that you don't then try to mix that into any fresh, clean, clear sap, because you're not gonna be able to dilute it out. Just discard what has gone off. Start fresh with something new. I had one mistake, as I said before. I've done this a little bit, and I've learned a lot of what not to do. And I had one day where I way too long left a bucket of almost syrup out in my back porch, and we had some warm days, and I looked in it, and there was kind of a weird smell, and it turned into almost like a gelatinous goo where I tried to pour the bucket out into a pot, and then I stopped pouring, but for some kind of bonding, I don't know, the liquid just kind of continued to flow out of the bucket. It was disgusting, to say the least. We got rid of that So yeah, just be aware, keep track of how long you're storing this stuff. Try to process as soon as you can because again, issues can come up, and we want to make sure that whatever you're making is worth your time and edible. Okay, now we're getting into that process of creating or transitioning or changing your sap into syrup. First, we can just talk about that equipment and supplies. The first thing you're going to need is an evaporating pan, some large stainless steel pan that's going to be able to hold your liquid and can be boiled in. Whether this is like steamer pans from like kind of buffets is a good one. They have specific chambered and baffled evaporating pans specifically for maple syrup processing. There's an example of that in the bottom left picture. Basically, something as large as you can or whatever fits your needs best. Something that can be held over a heat source to let that sap boil in. Next thing you're going to need is figure out what your heat source is. Open fire pit, or just like wood fire is the most common. It's pretty cost effective. It's easy to do. You can do it on an open fire pit. You can use like a pit or a barrel stove. You can use a propane burner if you're doing large amounts of syrup, or sorry, a large amount of sap. The propane burner does work. It can just be, it can get kind of pricey as far as needing to buy more propane and go through that process. So I think if you can use wood, that's a very simple way to be able to boil your sap down. The next thing you're going to need is a thermometer or a hydrometer. A hydrometer is like a specific tool for measuring gravity or the liquid density relative to water. It's maybe a more scientific way to be measuring your sap as it's turning into syrup, but a thermometer would also work as well, whichever you can get your hands on. Then you'll also need a smaller stainless steel finishing pot, some sieves and filters to be able to clean the syrup and sap as it's going through some of this process, and then just good food grade storage containers. A very common one are mason jars is what I've always used. They've worked very well. You can get those really cute little maple leaf jars, or there's a lot of great options. But yeah, some food safe that you can store in. So then how do you change sap into syrup? The first thing you want to do is, as you're processing your sap, filter it out. Throughout this process, you get a lot of sticks and bugs and all kinds of little debris in there. It's a great opportunity to clear all that out. So sieve it out so you're just getting just liquid. And then you put it into your evaporating pan over your heat source. And then you boil it, and then you continue to boil it, and then you continue to boil it. And that's really what the process is. It's just keeping up a high heat, letting that sap boil down, and the goal to remove water from the sap to get down to that syrup. As we talked through those ratios before, sugar maple, you got to boil out 39. If you have 40 gallons of sap, you have to boil out 39 gallons of water to get to your 1 gallon of syrup. So it's a long process. This can be changed depending on the size of your pan, and the amount of sap that you're going through. This can be a ton of fun. It's just a great community building time. It's just having a fire. There's great smells and aroma that's happening. There's a lot of fun steam, and it's a great opportunity to get outside and enjoy this. Also, I would say make sure you do this outside. It's a lot of water that's evaporating. It can really have some ill effects if you do it in your kitchen for a very long time. So this is a great process to do outdoors in that late winter. So yes, to make sap into syrup, you boil it. That's it. Once you've boiled out the vast majority of that water and you're getting down, as that sap's getting closer to that syrup stage, you're going to start seeing it's going to be getting quite a bit darker. It's going to be quite a bit sweeter. Maybe you've almost gotten to like the bottom of maybe your evaporating pan. This is the time you're going to want to try to pull everything off, kill your fire, pull the syrup or almost syrup, the sap, off of the heat, put it into a finishing pot. And this is where you'll want to finish it in a more controlled environment, whether it be on a stove in a kitchen or on a smaller propane burner is a really good option. I encourage you, don't wait too long making this switch. We've had times where we kind of weren't paying enough attention, and then our sap turned into syrup maybe quicker than we realized, and we weren't able to get it out of our evaporating pan as fast, and created some burning and scalding in the pan, and it was a big mess. But also then added a little bit of a smoky flavor to our syrup, which tasted great. It wasn't we ate it all for sure. It wasn't too much of a problem, but it's definitely, I think, if you're able to get as much into your finishing pot, that's a good way to make sure everything's all controlled, and do that a little bit earlier maybe than what you would expect or what you would like to. So it's all equipment dependent. Um, as you're finishing your syrup, getting it into sap, this is where that thermometer or the hydrometer is going to come into play. But for the thermometer, as you're measuring your sap, once it reaches that 219 degrees Fahrenheit, that's usually an indicator that there's all the water, or as much water is out of this. Quite a bit of water is out of the sap. It's going to become that syrup consistency and sugar content that we want. So you're looking for that 219 degrees. Once that happens, take your pot off of your stove or whatever you're cooking on, your heat source is. You want to strain the hot sap through a fine filter, whether it's coffee filters or they make a real specific, like a filter sock that's really good for this. If you do it with a nice hot syrup, it goes through that filter pretty quickly. And this is an important process too. A byproduct of this boiling process is this grit that kind of shows up in the bottom, mixed in and with the syrup. I'm not entirely sure, I guess chemically or what it is, but it's commonly known as sugar sand. And if you're able to filter your hot sap right after you finish it, you can remove a lot of that sediment from your syrup, and the product you get is really nice and clean and clear. If you're unable to do this final filter, it's okay. It's not an absolute must. Um, what will happen is the final sap or final syrup that you're putting into your containers is going to be a little bit cloudy, and then after a little, like, couple weeks maybe of sitting, that sediment or sugar syrup is going to settle, and you'll get kind of a layer of this darker sugary sediment at the bottom of your container or jars, and then nice clean syrup up above it. As far as I've consumed it, I haven't had any troubles. I haven't heard of any advisory to not do so. So it's a healthy, safe thing, but well, maybe not healthy. It's just sugar, but it's safe. It's going to be not a problem. So if you're able to filter, and then once you have the filtering done, and you can have nice hot syrup poured into nice clean containers, and it'll be able to store for quite a while. You can store it for long-term storage. If you're doing like a jarring technique, that works great. Make sure then it's stored in like a dark, cooler space out of the sun is a good thing. Or if it's something you want to use right away, you can just have it in the fridge, or on this. It doesn't necessarily need to be refrigerated. You can have it out on the pantry or counter if it's something you're going to consume quickly. So that's kind of that whole process from collecting to boiling down and cooking off water into that finishing process. There's a lot of fun pieces, a lot of fun opportunities, and within that, there's some great opportunities to get your community involved. The first time my wife and I did this, we reached out to a handful using some social, like neighborhood social media stuff. We reached out to people around La Crosse to see if anybody was interested in joining us, if they had trees for us to tap, and how they would want to be a part of it. And we got a really big, just like a lot of people reached out. We ended up tapping. We went from maybe 2 or 3 trees between me and my parents to around 40 some trees all around La Crosse, Wisconsin. And we would spend every 3 days, go around and collect. And we were going to have kind of a community boil. But unfortunately, this all happened just before COVID. And so the pandemic was starting to kind of get more to the Midwest as we were boiling. So we had to stop that process. But it was a really fun opportunity. We met a lot of great people doing it. And and there's all kinds of opportunities like this throughout the state right now. I tried to get a few like options that I wanted to share today, and I found a list of it had to have been 40 different nature centers around the state who throughout the month of March are going to be doing maple syrup tapping and collecting and having kind of events around this. So the nature centers and outdoor education environmental centers around the state do a really good job at sharing this process and including people and getting everyone outside. It's a great opportunity. Yeah, as we're coming out of winter, it's a good chance to get out, kind of beat the cold a little bit. The Minnesota DNR at a handful of state parks also will have events that are going on. I know Whitewater State Park in Altura, down by Altura, is a pretty consistent, common one that the DNR does maple tapping events around. The one thing I wasn't finding is a lot of cities or a lot of cities who offering up events like this, and I think this is a great opportunity for the Minnesota cities and communities to be able to take this resource. Maple is one of the most common trees planted within our cities. It's always is in for most cities around the state, it's always in kind of the top three. So there's definitely an abundance of public city-owned maple trees. I think there's some fun opportunities for programs to be able to be put in place, and I would encourage you and your communities to do that. So yeah, you can get people involved in this process. There's a couple different school groups who are part of the tapping and the collecting in these pictures. I think they have like a relay race of filling up buckets with the sap in the center. And then once you get later on in this process and you've done your finishing, there's all kinds of fun ways you can teach people and show people how to use it. There's a common way you can make kind of a maple taffy by boiling syrup a little bit farther and then spreading it onto ice or packed snow, and then you get more of this like stringy molassesy taffy maple candy, which is fun. Or make maple butter, or just have it on pancakes, or use it in baking. It's versatile, and I think there's a lot of opportunities that people can use it maybe that they're not already doing. So there's great education, great engagement, and great just community building opportunities, I think, around this process that I would encourage everybody to participate in and put together. I throughout this, I did fact checked a couple of things. These are some of the resources I used that have a lot of good specific information. If anybody wants to follow those or wants more detailed stuff, maybe that I wasn't able to go through. These are a couple of great resources. And so, yeah, I just would want to say thank you. Again, my name's Mark. I'm with the DNR. I have my phone number and email address. Apparently, they're both very hard to read on the screen. I apologize for that, but yeah, I can answer any questions if anything's come up.
That was great, Mark. Yeah, we do have a couple questions in the chat.
Great.
So Jess Hall asked, I work for a municipality and we have had residents express interest in tapping park and boulevard trees, so trees on public property. Do any of you have experience with that or policies or guidelines? And it is a general question for everyone, but Mark, as I recall, that did come up with you in La Crosse, is that right?
Yeah, so we had an opportunity. I think at the time we were doing this, we tried to tap a couple boulevard trees. Some residents reached out to us and said, like, oh, I have like trees on my boulevard. And then the city was not as excited about that. Just part of their ordinance, part of it was, my wife and I were doing this as just a fun thing for ourselves. It wasn't a program with the city or any group. This was just something we put together ourselves. So we didn't have a lot of communication, or as much communication as we maybe should have, with the city about it to try to encourage them or try to get some trees on public spaces tapped. And what we ended up tapping were primarily people's private trees who wanted to be a part of it. But I think as far as including or as far as incorporating a public tree into something like this, it's really going to be up to the city. It's going to be up to the city, kind of how they want to, I guess what risks they would consider, or how they want to be able to manage and monitor these processes. I think that yeah, it's really I will of course I would love to say like yes they should let you tap their public trees, but there are some guidelines and requirements that they would have that you would need to follow. So if you want to tap those public trees, be in touch with your city forester or Parks and Rec department or Public Works, whoever's monitoring or managing those trees, and maybe you can come together and find a solution or work together to maybe create that community citywide program. Um, that maybe would have more set guidelines and rules that we would want to follow to make sure you have access to those public trees, but then it would be available to everybody and the city can kind of have their way to be a part of it.
Excellent, thank you. And then Chrisanne had a lot of great questions that were submitted as well, so we'll kind of bounce back and forth with them.
Yeah.
If you have veteran silver maples that are crown self-pruning, should you avoid tapping them to prevent additional stress?
Yeah, I would say so. I think a part of it, if the big chunk or a piece I would consider is what that tree's health and integrity is at the base. If you're seeing a lot of decay and kind of open cavities or if there's a lot of kind of dead or dieback that's maybe retreating further down into the canopy, or if just in general throughout the year it's looking really stressed and isn't doing well, I would say it might be something to avoid, or if it's a really large tree, maybe instead of putting that four taps in, maybe just one or two. Um, I think that's not a bad indicator. As far as I know, there is not a like a reduction in quality of your sap or syrup with the age of the tree. There might be a reduction in quantity of the sap that would be available as you get into those really old trees, and it's just maybe not producing as much. I guess I'm not sure entirely, but if you have a lot, if there's other opportunities, I would say let those veteran large trees that maybe are already struggling be and tap something maybe that's a little younger and healthier.
That makes sense. Thanks.
Mhm.
Next up, do you have an opinion about mixing syrup or sap from different acer species? Maybe like a blend to throw off some of those sommeliers of fine maple syrups.
Right. They'll kind of scare them away a little bit. No, I think I know that there is a taste difference in between um, the different species. It's minute and minimal. Um, I wouldn't say that I personally through recreational tapping, we've mixed a lot of sap from different trees. I think in a handful of years we would have red, sugar, silver, and Norway maple sap all mixed together. Um, the and it just as in a way to avoid having to do a lot of separate processing. Um, I think it doesn't hurt to have everything mixed together by any means. If you were a way that or a time or a moment I would consider maybe separating batches would be more so age. If you have older sap that's still good to boil, maybe, but not quite as fresh as another batch of sap. Um, you might want to consider separating those, maybe like have an older batch and a newer batch. But I wouldn't say that's a must. If it's easier just to boil it all at once and whatever your final product is, it's going to be pretty good, I think. But as far as separating between species, I personally haven't been able to find any difference between those tastes that's real significant.
Great, thank you. And Grace Benson chimed in saying they've tapped Norway, silver maple, and sugar maple and mixed it all together, and it still tasted good.
Yeah, yes, it's all delicious for sure. It's just sweet, sugary trees.
So I've got a couple questions about materials.
Yeah.
Excuse me. When you say coffee filters, do you use paper coffee filters? And is it okay to use metal collection buckets versus plastic?
Yes. Okay, for the filters, yes, just paper coffee filters have worked fine for me. I've never used like a specific cloth coffee filter, but they have some like specific tree like maple syrup cloth filters. But the paper ones work really well. If you can get like kind of your biggest, the way I've used it for coffee filters, if I have the biggest like colander or sieve I have, put a handful of different layers of coffee filters around it. And then as you pour that syrup in, the filters will the filters they'll get they do their job. They filter out any sediment and stuff, but they do get clogged up. So if you have maybe a layer of 5 or 6 of them kind of in your sieve, you can peel away those really clogged up outer facing filters and then have a fresh one underneath, and you can kind of get through that filtering process a little bit more. But the paper ones work very well, just like a regular one you'd get at any grocery store or that you'd use in a drip coffee pot.
Excellent.
Oh
Thank
wait,
you. Oh,
the metal and plastic buckets. Sorry. I don't know. I have not heard of a reason to do one over the other. Um, if I had to guess of one or suggest one, a big part of storing your sap is going to be temperature, like and sunlight. If you
mm,
have a metal bucket with a lid, even if it's just a lid on top, you might be able to keep that temperature of that sap at a little bit lower, especially if your bucket's on that north facing side. Oh, sorry, south facing side of the tree directly in the sun. If you have that opaque surface, it might do a little bit better at keeping that sap at a cooler temperature. But as far as the material specifically affecting the sap, I don't think there's going to be much of an issue. The one thing I have had questions about is we had a lot of luck finding containers for storage and for collection of like previously food safe buckets or containers that had other food in them. So we would go to like the bakery at a grocery store. They get a lot of their like donut fillings and frostings in these like 3 to 4 gallon buckets, which are perfect for collection. But there's always like if it's going to be like lemon jelly, there'll be like that taste or flavor, not taste so much, but that smell will be there. And there's maybe a potential. Again, our sommeliers, our fine maple syrup sommeliers might be able to tell the difference. We had 2 of our large 55-gallon barrels previously held um jalapeno, like pickled jalapenos, which we washed. I washed and washed and washed it, and there's still this tiny tint of that smell, but I haven't been able to have any ill effect from the sap sitting in those storage containers and taking on that flavor. So that would be the one thing to consider as far as like a material maybe affecting the syrup that could possibly. I haven't had any big problems with it, but again, each thing's going to be a little bit different.
and this last one's kind of time sensitive.
Okay.
So we learned that tapping should begin when nighttime temps are below freezing and daytime temps are above 40. So do you think tomorrow would be good? And what other
Yes.
timing secrets do you have? And how many days should we leave those taps in?
Right. Okay. So yes, tomorrow's great. Of course, it all is going to depend on where you are in the state. Northern Minnesota, maybe it's a little bit early, but I think you could absolutely still put those taps out, even if you're starting to get into um, those correct temperatures. Tomorrow's great. If you can go today, go for it as well. Because yeah, it's nice to get those taps in. If you know those temperatures are coming, you can get them in just before, and then you're going to be able to collect that first little bit of sap as soon as it's going to start coming out. Sorry, can you repeat the second part of that question? My brain's all over.
What other timing secrets do you have? And then how many days do you leave the taps in?
How long? Okay. As far as timing secrets go, I think I don't know of any specific secrets. I think it is really just like that. It is dependent on that temperature. And that temperature can happen in end of January, early February. It can happen in end of March. It's really, don't ever think of it as like a specific week or month that these temperatures come about. You can tap whenever that temperature change is happening. Another way in that kids book that I read, that the sugar on snow, they talk about when the temperature, like you feel when spring temperatures hit. It's like more of a feeling than like a forecasting. And I would say like that is accurate. I think when you feel that, it's like, yes, okay, this is like spring's happening, those temperatures are changing. We've had like more successful, or we've been able to collect more sap, and there's been more flows on those days for sure. Um, but as far as like real specific secrets, no, I don't have anything very like perfect tip. As far as length, I would say if you, I don't know. We have left taps in for months on end. You leave them out. If you're getting this long period of those temperatures changing, those temperature kind of like guidelines that you want to stay within, you could have a very long temper or a very long tapping season, and you'll be able to continue to collect sap. Really, the goal would be the reasons we would remove taps. The first one being it's just been too long, and we want to do something else, and we just don't want to keep collecting sap, or we have enough. That's when we would remove. The other one being usually as that tree's coming further out of its dormancy and you start getting more like bud development and flower buds to break specific silver maples is always very clear. When those buds start to swell, those like early flowers start to bloom, then those sugars are being used for something else, and then the syrup that is going to be produced is not going to be quite as sweet. It's a little bit more on that bitter side, and so that's usually a good indicator when you would want to pull them.
Great. And a follow-up to that, so you don't have to worry about the taps clogging, is what you're saying.
No, it's like the mayor. I assume you're talking about like the wounds healing over. Maybe that's what that question's. Um, you don't need to worry about them. Yeah, that wound you won't need to re-tap because the wound you've created is healing over. Usually having that tap in and it's in that dormancy time, there's not quite as much growth that's happening in that for that kind of healing at the time. You can continuously have flow happening. If you're talking about like the taps clogging, that's where we would want that slight angle tap. Yeah, if you like angle your taps down, you can make sure nothing's going to be staying up and in there and coming. You're not going to be clogging up that space at all.
Thank you so much. Excellent. I'm all out of questions from the chat.
Great. Awesome. Thank you.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for attending today. Again, we don't have any ISACUs, but we do appreciate you coming in and having some fun. We did add some links in the chat there too on the origins of maple syruping, maple sugaring, if you want to investigate further. Lots of great resources. And thank you to both Mark and Maddie for presenting today. And I hope you all have a wonderful week. Bye.